Hi.
Nice.
Hi,
Somebody I
good to
know.
see you. I think there are a few more of us coming that you know.
Okay, so I have friends. I can relax.
Yes.
Oh, hello, Madalena. Yeah.
Hi, Alain. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Excellentia, for
Hello, Madalena. Hello, you're welcome.
Oh, somebody else want to say something?
Just to introduce myself, I'm Chiara. I'm Italian, but based in Singapore. And I'm fairly new to the coaching, even if I got my certification for PCC recently. And I'm here because I've got the suggestion for one of my mentor in CMA, that's the training school I attended. And that's it.
You're welcome, Chiara.
Where do you live?
Singapore.
Singapore. Okay.
Okay, great. We shall start. So, Alain, are you ready? Alain, you're on mute.
There you go.
Okay.
So yes, I was on mute. Very sorry. To what for the conference, I would suggest a few operating principles. You don't have to do it, but what I like is when I see people, so they can see me, I can see you, and it's more alive than if I talk to a screen full of dark boxes with names on it. So that's my preference. So don't hesitate.
Alain, if I may, so I'd like to introduce you first.
Okay, go ahead.
So I know that we do not introduce you, but for the sake of the exercise, let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, so I welcome everybody, especially our guest speaker, Alain Cardon. So he is an executive and team organizational systemic coach, an author of 15 books, coach, trainer, supervisor, keynote speaker, and he's an MCC coach. And he's here today to introduce us to this subject, systemic coaching, pattern recognition mindset. So we're really very pleased and honored to have you among us. Alain, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much.
We did it.
Now, a few things also to say. I was born in Algeria. I'm French, even though I speak English like a Midwestern American. I was born in Algeria, raised in Egypt for about 16 years. So I have some affinity with the Middle East, cultures and language and so on. And then I went to the States for 6 years and studied anthropology and other social sciences. And then came to France and did my military service and so on. And that was in the early 70s. And I have been in this type of communication and communication and relationship as a trainer, business as a trainer, and then consultant, and then a coach since 2002. I live both in France and Romania, and then others. So between France and Romania is 50-50, which explains a few Romanian participants here because they're informed of what I do. So that's a quick introduction. If you want to know more, I mean, go on the website or look me up on Google. Is Alain Cardon MCC is the key word that will take you places. At any rate,
you're a global citizen, Alain.
Well, it's more European now. I'm calming down, but and with the Zoom, anybody can be a global citizen.
So and you embrace diversity. You have it within.
Yes, yes, I sort of fell into diversity as a kid. So, at any rate, to start on the subject, which is systemic coaching and pattern recognition, in a way, it's about having a mindset more than having tools and techniques and so on. So, to acquire a mindset, actually, that's part of the title: is systemic coaching, pattern recognition, mindset. That's a whole mouthful. But to have a mindset, actually, you need to practice and practice and practice, and it becomes part of your way of observing things, and it becomes part of your reality. A lot of people think that you access new realities in a mental way by just reading books or something. But I am convinced that you access new realities by living them every day and practicing different behaviors and learning in a way with your hands and with your body and with your presence and so on. So a lot of, I've been into the systemic dimension for 30, 40 years. I got into that as a consultant, sort of looking at the constellation dimension of teams and organizations and doing team development with a completely different approach than team building, but with a systemic approach. And that was in the 80s. And then when I came to coaching, I came with this systemic dimension and perception and practice. So in a way, it's part of a long-term development on my part. It's part of my reality to be in this. So what's for today, what I was thinking is tell some stories of things that, happened to me or that I experience, and then go from there. In other words, be as pragmatic as possible with something that happened, and then see, what theory we could come out of, or what questions we get out of it. In other words, to start with reality rather than to start with theory on systems thinking and so on. But maybe one thing to say actually is a lot of people think systemic approach applies to systems like teams and organizations or families or something. Actually, being systemic is a way of being, and it applies to your relationship with yourself, in a relationship with one other person. So it applies to one-on-one coaching. It's just a different way of being and sensing reality. To give a first example of something that happened to me. Now, I'd like to say I'm sorry for the people who already heard those stories or read about them, because a lot of what sticks in my mind is what I wrote about or already said. I don't have a new example every day, or I may have, but I don't write on all of them. So at any rate, once I was called to see a client, and I had to go to their office. The client was an entrepreneur, and so it was in his location. And I went all the way there. It's on the other side of the town. And when I arrived in the office, I first met the assistant in the reception. And the assistant was aware of my coming and immediately told me, there's a problem. The boss has to leave. He has a very urgent meeting. We have to call the meeting off. And so, I went through my immediate reaction, which is, oh shit, another wasted afternoon. Here we go again. I mean, it's typical of entrepreneurs to cancel at the last minute. And, I was going through my negative thoughts. And then I kind of clicked as he came in the room with a lot of energy. And he says, oh, I have to go, sorry, etc. And I said, it doesn't matter, I'll come with you. How are you going? He says, I'm driving there. I'll say, okay, I'll come with you. And we can talk on the way. And so we both went to the parking and got his car, and he started shooting across town because his meeting was rather soon. He didn't have much time. And the next thing that started happening is we got in a traffic jam. And so he was stuck on the road, and he was sort of getting more and more, impatient and angry and stuff like that. And I started, saying, I better be quiet because he'll probably take his anger off on me. And so I just let him have all this space so he could deal with his situation. And suddenly he, after sort of building up his anger, he suddenly saw an opening on a side street, and he took that side street that was in another direction, and then hit another side street, another, and just taking open streets, and finally coming to another avenue and taking it in the right direction. And then, there was suddenly an opening, and then he arrived a few minutes late to his destination, where he had his meeting on something important for him, like a merger or a partnership. And just as he was arriving and finding a parking space, he says, "Okay, what do you have to say?" And so I sort of thought about the whole pattern there and said, okay, if we look at what just happened, you were coming to your destination and you got really stuck and you got mad and you started climbing up a tree, and that was not very helpful. But then you got some side vision and you found an opening, and you took that opening and you used it and adjusted until you found another avenue. And that avenue got you to your destination a little bit late, but you're happy because you're here. I wonder how that's going to apply to your meeting. How that pattern is going to apply to your meeting. It's just a thought, but if you ask me anything, this is all I have to say now. And we said goodbye, and I left. And actually, a week later, he called me and he said, what you said was really, really helpful, because in our meeting, we got stuck and the negative energy was building up. And I got creative in the same way. I found a little opening, we both took it, and then that led to another one and to another one. And actually, our plan is back on track. It's not the original plan. It's going to take a little more time. But the partnership is going to work out. And I said, great. Yeah. So this is an example of how being aware of what's going on in real time actually gives you a pattern. Are you capable of seizing it, catching the pattern? In this case, actually, it happened 3 times. Because it happened before I even met him. It happened to me individually. I got to his office, the situation was canceled. I got into my usual, anger pattern. And then he arrived and I said, oh, there was a slight opening, which is, I'll come with you. And that gave an opening. So the pattern was also in me, almost separately from him, or in me with him. It was together in the same kind of pattern in our drive to the destination. It was already twice. And it happened to him again between him and his other partner that I never met, which was in his business. So if you're open to systemic thinking in a way, the whole point is to say, we are in a field of patterns. Things don't happen by chance. Are we capable of being aware of the pattern, reading the pattern, or an interpretation of the pattern, and then adjusting to see how that pattern is what's happening now today, and using it and welcoming it, embracing it, rather than having an idea of how things should happen. And if they don't happen the way I thought they would happen, then I get stuck. Okay. Am I clear in this example? Is there any reaction here? Do you understand what I'm talking about?
I have a question here.
Yes, yes.
You saw this event unfolding in that with the client, and to me, a pattern is something which repeats over and over again. How
Well,
did you?
in this case, it happened 3 times for me in the same day. Well, at least twice for me. And it so happened that one of my partners also had the same pattern with his partner.
Okay.
So there's repetition there.
Okay.
Now, does it mean the repetition is going to go on forever? I don't think so. Yeah. In other words, it's an emerging pattern, and everything is emerging all the time in nature. But at one point in time, if you catch on what the present pattern is, you may see it in different aspects of your life, personal, professional, sports, but it's a now pattern. Now, one of the problems here is people who want to have predictability and previsibility in the long term and want to be control freaks are looking for patterns that are going to be there forever so they could predict. Reality is not built that way, only machines. So engineers' patterns are different from, life patterns. It's different systems. It's evolving systems. They learn and they develop. So hopefully my patterns tomorrow are not the same as my patterns today and not the same as my patterns years ago, because I'm growing.
Alain, if I may ask a question. So the pattern here you're talking about in this example, is it the fact that you got frustrated once you heard that the meeting would be canceled?
Well, that's one of my patterns. If I have a predictability and it doesn't happen the way I want, my first reaction is,
Because I see another pattern.
Yeah.
I see another pattern. I see the fact that you looked for an opening in that situation.
Well, that's part of it. My first reaction is anger. And it was his also in the traffic jam, honk and so on.
Yeah.
And then his second is this doesn't work. And you start looking for tangents, openings. And then you see one, you seize it. And then that get installed. There's another opening, you start seizing openings. And side openings actually lead to another avenue. Interesting. Let's take that avenue. Okay. So the pattern is not just one part of the pattern. It's the whole chain of events that is interesting. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's, a switch. You could say one of my thinking actually in terms of theory there is to say, if patterns had 5 or 6 steps, what are they? In other words, how do I start? What happens next? What happens next? What happens next? And then what's the outcome? Patterns are not just single events. That's an event. But patterns are a series of events that have a coherency, and that series may be repetitious at one point in time.
Could we say, Alain, here that there is an impulsive pattern subconscious one, and a chosen pattern.
Well, I would say, in a way, all your patterns are chosen at one point in time. And you may make it a habit, in which case you'll say, oh, this is me. Or you may decide to adjust it gradually, and over time, you develop, richer or more useful or very different patterns. But everything is a habit anyways, because it comes from the past. I mean, I wasn't born with it that I know of. I can't say, okay, I don't know. Some people say, I'm late, I'm always late. This is the way I am. I was born late, Okay, I think that's a justification. But if you decide that, okay, from now on, I'm not going to be late, that's possible too.
Can I have a question, please?
Yeah.
Who is the pattern of it was your patterns, or it was the client's patterns, or both of you? Who had this pattern?
Well, that's a good question, but according to the law of attraction, you attract people who fit into your patterns and you fit into theirs. And in this case, we could say the coach's pattern fits the client's pattern, fits his partner's pattern. Okay? So there's a good reason to meet. Now, suppose it was not my pattern. Maybe I would have come there and say, okay, this client doesn't respect me. I need to stop this contract. That would be another pattern. And I would probably have a lot of other patterns in my life. In other words, I would attract clients that respect their contracts, that are less, open to everything like an entrepreneur. Now, that happens to me. Sometimes a coach will say, I have a client, I don't know what to do. He always cancels, he always postpones. My answer is, okay, send them to me. If you can't be agile about it, you just want, predictable people for your own predictability. It's your pattern. Well, don't take these clients. Now, of course, the best coaches are the ones who can adjust to a lot of different patterns and work with them. Or do you think that, if somebody doesn't fit your pattern, he's a bad person? He needs to change. So what's your access, or, what's your agility to recognize a different pattern immediately and say, why not? And then jump into it.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you mentioned the habits, and I mean, we all have habits that don't serve us. And ultimately, working with clients, we want to help them to transform, to become the people that they want to be, to achieve whatever it is that they are setting out to achieve.
Yeah, can you give me an example of a pattern that doesn't serve you?
Okay, so a pattern that I became aware of when I was coached for the first time, and that was in 2003, is that whenever I face a big project, I would procrastinate. And so where I came to the understanding that when something was too big, and if I, too big for my brain to see, then I would kind of leave it for a couple of days. And I don't know what I was hoping,
Wait. How is that? Wait.
Okay.
How is that pattern very useful?
It wasn't.
How is that pattern very useful?
Do you mean before I had the understanding or now?
Well, if you understand it and say it's useful, how is that pattern very productive? You understand what I mean?
No. My thinking is when I first became aware of it, the pattern wasn't useful.
Yes, I understand that. You said it.
Okay, all right.
So I'm asking you a completely different question. How is it useful? And I have an idea.
Okay.
In other words, you could say you're facing a very big project. It's the Himalaya. And you could not procrastinate and immediately go. That could be dangerous. Procrastination is also a way of giving yourself the time to process gradually what the first step is and the second step is, and do it more intelligently, therefore more safely. You
Okay, so-
had an instinct not to rush into big projects for your protection. Okay?
Okay, I like that.
Wait. Which means, if I take it further, that a complete coaching position is you look at a client's pattern, it's like a coin. There's a positive side and a negative side. If you take it as negative and lead the client into getting rid of the pattern, you're missing on something. The client would not have this pattern if it was not useful. There's always two sides to the coin. You need to coach both sides.
If I listen to what you are saying now, and I have to say, my coach back then was a brand spanking new coach. She had literally just completed her coach training. And
Which was really interesting too, because that's got a positive and a negative side.
yeah.
Don't start saying there's judgment there. Because
there's no judgment. But what I want to say is that although I didn't view it as two sides of the coin, what the coaching helped me do was create a system with which I could use, and I still use it to this day, to overcome, if you want to call it that obstacle of the procrastination. So it's interesting for me that you say that I was procrastinating because it was safe. So that was the one side of the coin. The other side of the coin was that I was frustrating the people who were expecting me to do something. So to
do something faster, to do it faster.
Yeah. So I still have that pattern, if you like, of procrastination when something big is put in front of me.
Yeah.
But I have a system now that I can use to actually tackle it.
Yes. So you've grown with your pattern.
Yes.
But in a way, coming back to the position of somebody who's into pattern recognition, by definition, all patterns are positive and negative.
Yes.
In other words, it's kind of like in physics, in the universe, the positive and the negative equal. It's yin and yang. That's what makes the whole. If you look at the negative, you're biased. If you look at the positive, you're biased. You need to tackle both. So it's not about negative patterns and positive patterns. It's about patterns.
It's about the whole. It's about the whole.
You could look at the dark side of the force or the light side of the force. It's the same Jedi.
Yeah. So thank you very much for that, because I think that's given the whole thing around, or my whole view around habits, serving or non-serving, a whole new dimension. I think that's And
in terms of coaching, it's essential, because if you say somebody has a negative habit, you're judgmental, and the person will, I have to change this, and will not take the essence of that positive habit.
Yes. I need to think about this a lot more, but thank you very much. This has been hugely helpful.
Yeah, apply it to everything. I mean, for instance, I love this person because, I don't know, he's extremely sensitive, and I can't stand this person because he's extremely sensitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Et cetera, et cetera. Apply it to everything. Everything is both positive and negative.
Of
And I
course,
think, sorry.
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
So I think how this really helps me. So I've never coached people to get rid of a habit, because I don't think it's possible anyway.
Okay.
I mean, if I just think back, our brains are so wonderful, and that you know that they remember things for so long. And I mean, I'm just as an example, my son has now suddenly decided to play squash instead of tennis. And so he asked if I would play against him, and I haven't played for like 15 years. And I got on the court and I could remember what to do. You know, and I mean, yes, that's something physical that you do, but I think you can compare that to habits. So I think what this helps with is to say, so how do we build on this habit that you have to actually change it?
Basically, we agree. We could develop on this forever. But basically, if it didn't serve a purpose, it wouldn't be here. The purpose must be positive.
Yeah.
So what's the positive purpose, and what's the limit? Okay, where can I stretch it? So we don't get rid of habits, but we evolve them, and we embrace their positive and negative side, and then evolve them. We tune them up a little more. But that takes time. You wanted to say something.
No, I think I like.
Yeah, I was moving on to excellence. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Nice. Okay, so
Harris. Sorry, you wanted to say something and jump in here. So
yeah. So my question is simple. So can something positive be negative at the same time?
Yes.
The same situation. With
Yes.
The same people.
Yes, it depends who's looking and what's your frame of reference.
So at the same time, at the same moment, in the same situation with the same people.
Yeah.
So let me reframe the question differently. Can I have a positive and a negative feeling at the same time?
Yes.
The same moment. So can I?
I understand, and we're repeating each other in circles. It's a good pattern. But imagine, take COVID. It's negative experience for a lot of people. It's also a huge opening for a lot of people. We could say probably in 3 years, people will look back at 2019 and say, this provoked major useful change in the world. It was one of the most creative years that we've been waiting for a long time.
But these are different people, Alain.
It could be. And at the same time, it's challenging, but it's a one point in time. One person could say it's hell, and then later say it was useful. And
so it's all at the same time.
Not necessarily at the same time. Of course, you don't have a sentence that says it's opposite at the same time, unless it's totally paradoxical. But you get a different perspective. So somebody will come to coaching and say, I need to change this. It's negative. But with a good coach, you could also see what's positive in it that you need to keep. But people come to coaching very often with feelings of, not being able to do things. And the coach position is, you're able to do it, you've started doing it. Okay? Because you accompany somebody in their power. So you need to recognize the power. The person feels powerless. So basically, coaching rests on the idea that people are adults, they're vaccinated, they're powerful, they know their answers, they know their solutions. If that was perceived by the clients, they wouldn't come. So at the same point in time, you have totally different perception by different people. And the whole idea, of course, is to have a dialogue that helps the evolution, the client evolve in the direction they want with the power they have that they don't see.
I got you on that, Alain, but still I'm really wondering if I totally agree. If we change peoples would change
Okay.
perception.
So what's your question?
The same perception. So, but speaking about patterns, what if I had positive patterns in my childhood, adulthood, and now things changed. So, and what was positive now is negative. So you see, it's still the same thing. It was positive, but time changed. The circumstances changed.
Yeah.
And what was positive now is negative. Maybe it would be positive in the future. So how to determine, how to help your client get that awareness, whether this pattern is positive and
Okay, we need to step back. I understand your question. I think you have your answer. That's why you're insisting on the question. But we need to step back because you're saying, is it positive or is it negative? And I'm saying it's just perception.
Of course.
In other words, you don't have any access to what it is. Nobody has access to what it is. You just have access to your perception. Okay? So your perception depends on you. That's my point of view. But we're not talking about the event. Is it positive or is it negative? And actually, in physics, we'll say it's both. Because everything is positive and negative. Positive and negative doesn't exist. Okay? So you need to just say it's the event. For instance, you say, watch what you wish for because you will get it. Okay? Watch what you wish for. Watch what you're afraid of because you will provoke it. Okay? In other words, you have the pattern in your head, you will create it. So, but it's not out there. And in physics, actually, if you take it far in quantum mechanics, there's no reality out there anyways. Yeah. It's all projection. So we don't know what's out there. For all we know, it's just energy. But our brain constructs material stuff and so on and so forth. So if you stretch it to an ultimate theoretical construct, this really reinforces that everything's positive or negative. It's up to you. What do you choose to see? And how do you work with it? So that's, if you take systemic thinking to its extreme, we become quantum physicists. So we're getting lost in theory, but it's good to take it from an example. So, and I'm sure everybody has examples and examples of where you were surprised by what is called synchronicity or coincidence, etc. Now, my point of view is it's always there. It's part of the field. It's part of the systemic field. Sometimes you will catch it, sometimes you won't. You can practice seeing it as much as you want. It's always there. Does that freak you out?
So thank you, Alain, for your answers. Still, this is what I think. So still, there is nothing real. We have just our perception, and our perception may change. What we see as positive now may be negative in the future.
Yeah. Or maybe perceived as negative, maybe perceived as positive, and at the same time by different people, etc. It's not in the quality of what's out there, it's in the quality of perceptions.
Yeah. Perfect.
I have one question, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Going back to your example with the entrepreneur, have you discussed with him the negative side of always looking for a side way, or have you discussed the limitations of it? Or also would it be necessary? Because you say that there is positive and negative.
No, I don't see how it's negative, because he achieved his goal and it came to a really good outlook. I mean, for me, in his flow, we don't know really if he had stayed in the traffic jam, what would have happened. He made a number of choices and it opened new realities. Okay. And that's the way he functions. That's what makes him an entrepreneur.
But on the other hand, yes, just to stretch the idea, but on the other hand, he canceled a meeting with you. You see, and you see if a person keeps this pattern of maybe canceling the last minute meetings previously accorded, you see, I just want to understand if you can see the positive and the negative in this situation.
Well, he probably knows the negative dimension, because he jumps from one thing to another all the time. In the middle of a meeting, they change subjects, they change focus, they may even decide to change the product, et cetera, et cetera. The tendency, the negative part, is if I come to a difficulty, well, I'll switch rather than face the difficulty. Okay, in some cases, it's good to let go of the difficulty. You're up against a cliff. In other cases, it's good to really challenge the difficulty and stick with it. Okay. Now, does he know how to do this? I don't know. Is it useful? Maybe he has. I don't know. Very often, entrepreneurs are surrounded by people that stick with the difficulty. In other words, he has a very good lawyer. He has a very good financial, an accountant. They usually delegate the difficulties to other people so that they can, do what they do.
A safety net.
Okay, so nothing is positive or negative, but if you know the possible negative, then you'll adjust.
Okay.
Now, this is patterns, and of course, they come from what they are and whatever. Usually people like this are the last children in the family. They're the babies in the family. Yeah. Usually if you're the oldest, you're responsible and you stick with it and you carry other people and so on. If you're the youngest, you make a mess and other people clean it up. So it's good to see, what type of pattern they're into, and it has its coherency. He's successful. He's got his company. He's paying me. Come on. He even goes so far as to get a coach. That's already less than 2% of the population. Who am I to say this is negative? Come on.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll give you another one. Another story. Once I was sitting in my yard in southern France, picking tomatoes. I really love those tomatoes that are small, so on. And my phone rings. And this woman I know, she's a VP in a company. She hadn't been in contact with her for a while. She says, "Are you available? I have a problem." I said, "Sure." And she says, "Well, I'm in this meeting on a merger with my president and the president of the other company, and we're going and it's getting worse and worse and worse. We're not. I don't like it at all. I'm on break. I have to get back in there in 15 minutes." And she starts telling me the details. And considering there's less than 15 minutes, I immediately interrupted her and said, "Can I interrupt you?" And she said, "Yes." And I waited a few seconds so that she'd be really present. And I said, "You're married, but imagine you were preparing your wedding and everybody was putting in their opinion and messing with it. And you really want to focus on the purpose of your marriage. What do you need to do?" And she was silent. And then she says, I think the meeting's over. I have to leave. I'll call you later. Yeah, that was over. It happened in 10, 15 minutes. Now, for me, just listening, a merger is two systems getting together, a wedding. So I made an emotional connection here. A week later, she calls me again. And she says, your phone call last week was very useful, thanks, but now we're into this and that. And I forget exactly the details, but it was of a lower intensity, level of intensity. And again, I, sort of cut it short, and it lasted 15 minutes. And she says, thank you, and I have to leave. And then she called me about a month later and says, I forgot to call you back, but everything's on the good tracks. It's going to work out. I'm very thankful. This is going to be great. It's a huge adventure, blah, 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 blah. I said, good, I'm happy for you. And so, and then I said, what we did was some coaching. And she says, yeah, I know. So I said, how much should I charge you? And she said, I really don't care. Just send me your bill. I said, okay, I'll charge you the equivalent of a day's 2 times 15 minutes, right? And she says, yeah, just send me your bill. Who cares? Now, what's interesting there? Yes?
It makes me think of the story where a big shipping company had a problem with.
Wait, don't tell another story because
No.
Where
it took what was the value that you gave the.
Okay, so actually, I'm not selling time. I'm selling added value.
Yes.
What else?
You used systems.
Yeah. But actually, I'm selling coaching in less than 15 minutes. I'm selling immediacy.
Okay.
What's most expensive for entrepreneurs and CEOs is time. Yeah. I'm selling phone coaching. In other words, it can be from anywhere, in a cab, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have to meet. It doesn't have to be Zoom. We don't have to send an invitation. I'm selling immediate availability anywhere. Okay. To give examples, sometimes, I don't know, I'm in the state, the phone rings 3 o'clock in the morning. I just pick it up and go to the bathroom so my wife can sleep. And I do immediate coaching. And the person will say, am I waking you up? And I'll say, yeah, I'm awake now, so go ahead. Okay. And I'll do immediate, short coaching, flash coaching. So, huge added value, very little time, constant availability. How much does it cost? There's no limit. There's no limit. Now, this is interesting because it is really not the pattern for coaches or even the pattern that is trained in ICF, etc. I even coach without having a contract. We did the contract at the end, which is much more interesting because the client knows he's earning millions and that costs nothing compared to millions. I could have said 10,000 euros. Because what is 10,000 euros compared to millions? Okay. So if this is a pattern and you want to reproduce it, how do you sell it? In other words, as a coach, I need 10 CEOs. I can say, I will be available for you all year, any time of day or night. It will cost you 50,000 euros. I just need 10 of these to earn 500,000. Okay. Now, unfortunately, coaches don't look at patterns and seize them when they happen by chance and say, whoa, what just happened there? What is this client showing me that I could think totally differently in terms of my business model? The going business model for coaches, according to standard thinking, is you sell time. It's got to be a lot of time, so 10 sessions is better than 2. You got to make it last to justify your presence. Of course, if you sell 10 or 15 sessions, you've got to fill them up with a lot of stuff. Let's go find theoretical models and tools and so on that are really interesting to fill space. This is a total postponing methodology. If you can coach in one session, that's 15 minutes. You don't have the same business model. Are you listening to your own patterns and challenging your own patterns, or are you just rolling because you've been told that's the way to do it? If you were really challenging everything about the coaching business model, what is possible is unbelievable to most coaches. So what are the patterns in which you're stuck, and what's the usefulness of really challenging your patterns? Yeah, you understand? Well, this is just a coach story. But thanks to a client, I discovered a whole new world. So are you freaking out yet? Now, this was told to me a long time ago by one person in the ICF who said, actually, the most important sessions in coaching are the first and the last. The rest is like an accordion. Because clients, when they know it's going to be over, they get with it. And when they start, it's still fresh, they get with it. So you can do away with all the sessions in between. And if you're really good, the first and the last is the same session. Now, again, in systems, quantum physics, time and space don't exist. No. The only thing that takes time is postponing. But if you eliminate time altogether, things are instantly possible. And that gets me to what I call flash coaching. In other words, you don't need time. Is this challenging enough for you, or do you want some more? We can do an illustration, except it's almost time. No, we've almost done our hour.
Yeah, so we still have 5 more minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes. Let's give it to.
How would you like to use them?
Well, it's normally we finish with questions and answers and start wrapping up, because if I throw you into something completely freaky again, it's going to be, so any questions and answers or reactions or whatever. Hello.
One thing I can add, if I may,
Yeah.
is I find very useful the way you change frame of reference. In the last example you gave, you brought out the client from her usual frame of reference or her focus in that moment.
Making parallel thinking into some other dimension. Yeah.
Yeah. When is the best time to do that? I mean,
as soon as possible. Immediately. Immediately. Sometimes you know what's going to happen in a session before you even start. And you could say to the client, before we start, I noticed this and this and this, and I could ask a powerful question by saying, how is that related to the issue you're going to develop? In other words, I see the pattern before the client talks. Yeah. But you can actually ask a very powerful question before the client talks about what's the issue. He'll make the connection. This is flash coaching. That's the importance of, I would say, the real power in systemic coaching is if you work with patterns, you don't need the content. You're working with patterns that come out of the field. You don't need the client content. You can start with the hypothesis that the pattern is present in what the client's going to talk about anyways. Test it. Now, it means, of course, that you have the practice of pattern recognition, that you really worked on this. You can catch it. It's both intuitive, but in time, you can make it more and more formal, and you know what to catch. You can sense it.
thank you.
So still we have 2 minutes, 2 more minutes. I don't know if anybody has a question, a comment, something to share before we wrap up.
Yeah, go ahead, Arun. We'll get a guy to say something. No guys has said anything so far. I wonder what the pattern here. Besides you, Ice.
Yeah, I was just thinking, something just occurred to me when you were speaking, talking about all this. Can we look at pattern? Once we recognize a pattern, it becomes a choice on whether we participate in that.
Oh, yeah.
So the whole purpose is to make it a choice, right?
Of course.
Based on the context and what you're trying to achieve in the long term.
Yeah.
And the second thing that occurred to me was,
I mean, you can immediately, we all do this. You meet somebody, you see a pattern, and you decide to go in another direction. You don't want any of this. Yeah. In other words, we make choices in life, and in some cases, I refuse clients before we even start. It's very clear.
And the second thing that occurred to me, I just wanted to know if I was in the right, if I was in sync, was if you're in a situation when you're dealing with a pattern which is arising, which is trying to make you participate or to reject it or whatever, and you have enough awareness that the pattern is kicking up on you. It just occurred to me that one way to deal with the situation is to look at the possibility rather than the solution that you had in mind. Look at the possibility that situation, just focus on what possibility that situation could have.
Well, this is usually the case, I think, because no client comes to a coach with a pattern that doesn't concern the coach and the learning of the coach. Okay. So in any pattern, if it's offered to you as a coach, it's because you can learn from it as a coach in your own life. You know, we fit together. We don't attract just anybody. We attract, you know, patterns and systems that have patterns that correspond to what I need to develop and the client. So we actually grow together.
Okay, great. So I think with this, we come to the end of our webinar. It was really intense. I see everybody, I saw everybody during this webinar focused, really paying attention with the beautiful smile. I don't know why, but everyone was really focused and smiling and enjoying the session. Great stories and great learnings. Thank you, Alain, for really offering this space and this high level of connection. And I believe in your systematic approach, and I believe
systemic.
Yeah, the systemic approach, and I believe that we will somehow embrace some of the patterns you shared with us today, and one of them, your generosity. So thank you for that, thank you for being here, and thank you for everyone. And let's all together applaud Alain for this wonderful webinar. Thank you so much, and goodbye, everybody. See you in the next webinars. Bye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Harris.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.